when I first started doing training or being trained, we had a lot of conversations about uh, our differences. We had lots of conversations about what makes us different. And then we started having conversations about, and I don't know if anybody remembers this, that they moved from diversity training to this idea of cultural competence training. Anyone remember that? So that was the transition, right? So similarly, along that same trajectory, African American people went from being, black to being African American, which was a little bit different than being Afro American. So there was this kind of nuance in this progression, and all those kinds of things happened in the 90s. And actually in the 90s, we also birthed something called political correctness, right? Does anyone remember the birth of that, right? So basically, we get to a point where we don't know what to call people or how to say things because we don't want to offend people. Does anyone remember those early conversations of not wanting to offend? And apparently right now, offending people is bold. Like, that's the cool thing to do, is to offend as many people as possible. But what I've come to is this idea that we need to have some cultural humility. And we'll talk about what that is in just a second. So it's clear. Does everyone have a handout? I'm going to make sure that everyone has a handout. Pass those back to brothers and sisters that may have missed some. Pass that over. Right. Bishop is not coming back. So it's very clear that thank you so much, I have handouts and I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm prepared to do this workshop. But I'm also curious, what did you expect or what did you want to get out of our time together? What were your expectations, or what would you like to talk about that you want to make sure that I cover in the time that we're together? Bias? So when you say bias, what do you mean by that?
It's that concept of bias, that there's cultural competence and then there's just all different bias that we come to the table with.
Okay.
That impact them.
Okay, so impacts bias, how we get them, what they are, so forth and so on. All right, yes.
Language, you kind of started with your little, black to Afro-Caribbean to African American, etc. Like, where are we now? What should we do?
Okay. So what should we call people?
Yeah.
I think also about language, some of it, you hear like diversity, equity, inclusion, you throw around some of these linguistic monikers a lot. Again, what should we call things?
Yeah.
People. I was just listening to NPR and discussion about inequity is the word that we're using for education. And if we look at our idea here that that's an intent, well, inequity isn't an outcome, it's an intent. So I guess my curiosity in regards to a current issue.
Yeah, so when we talk about, and I just have to touch on that just for a second, I love linguistic monikers. I'm going to use that. That's going to be the title of my next book. But linguistic moniker.
Okay, no comments from the Phoenix Gallery. People who know me.
No, but it's very interesting that we keep talking about this educational gap or the educational lack of access and that kind of stuff. And again, these are sideshows to keep us from talking about the real thing. Whenever we talk about inequity, what we don't talk about, particularly, and you'll hear it in words like poverty, right? So people talk about it in terms of poverty. When we talk about poverty, who are we talking about? We're talking about people.
Minority races.
Minority races. We're talking about people. People are not poor. Systems are. So when we talk about this idea of inequity, we end up talking about individuals, we talk about personal choices and all this kind of stuff, but we never analyze the system that these people are responding to or not getting benefits from. Right? So what else? What else? Yes.
Well, related to that, I want to find out how to be a better supervisor and coworker and influence like the nonprofit system in a better way.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Other folks, expectations, things you'd like to, yes.
Learning assessment of culture for our clients. Assessment of culture.
So one more privilege that, or mind frame that I want to acknowledge is that I use pronouns he and her, she and he, and that kind of stuff. If that doesn't fit, come to the side, let me know, because you don't need to out yourself or out me in public, but you can come to me and whisper if there's another pronoun that works better. But that's my positioning, and I'm growing. Yes.
Similar to what Jeremiah just asked, how do I get a stranger to talk about their culture?
What's the context of the stranger?
Well, they're a brand new client sitting in
Okay.
front of me. I've never met them
Yeah.
before, and I'm asking them 1,000,005 questions all at once. And then I get to the question that says, "Ooh, tell me how your culture interferes or influences your current crisis," and I get a blank stare.
Yep.
And I'm trying to teach myself and a whole set of staff, like, how do we ask a question? How do we elicit something more real?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. This is gonna be fun. Yes.
Kind of going off of that with eliciting something more real, just thinking about working with interns and what kind of prompts could we give them to help them think a little deeper? Because I know that especially people in undergrad, they're talking about this stuff, but it might just be surface and just buzzwords. And how do we take that internal processing a little deeper then? So if there's any prompts that we can do with interns too.
All right.
Going off of that, so working with an intern who maybe has some of their own injuries in life, so to speak, and therefore feeling like they're not privileged, but yet because they're white, they're privileged, and how to help them bridge from that somewhat woundedness into, I still have privilege and still to be more open about cultural differences.
Yeah. So you hit one of my sore spots. So first of all, part of my job as a teacher and a guide and a person who's trying to figure this stuff out myself is not to tell somebody what they have or don't have. My job is to give them information in order for them to expand what they know about themselves and the world. I have a serious problem with white privilege, both as a concept and then how it's used. A kid from Frogtown. You guys know what Frogtown is? Yeah. Oh, no, better. A white kid from the West Side. This neighborhood. Meets John Kerry's daughter and wants to marry her. Blue collar kid. What does John Kerry say? Huh? What do you think John Kerry's going to say? You know John Kerry, right? Secretary of State. What does he say?
What kind of person is he?
So you think that's the first question he asks? Is what kind of person is he?
That's like.
That's what you want him to say. But what do you think? Okay, Mitt Romney, the young man meets Mitt Romney's daughter and says, "I want to marry her. I work at what's the Boca Chica? No, what's the Taco House? I work at Taco House and I'm in love with your daughter. I want to marry her." What does Mitt Romney say? No. Why? Oh, he's not good, but he's white. They're white.
Social class.
Ah, so when we talk about this idea of white privilege, let's back up. I may make some frenemies. Right? What do white people say about other white people who don't measure up to the level of sophistication that most white people think that they should? They call them white trash. They call them trailer trash. What else do they call them? Cracker. Right? Anybody know where cracker comes from? Cracker. We'll talk more about that later. So this idea of white privilege is problematic because I can't tell someone that they have something unless they acknowledge it. And I don't want to teach people how to acknowledge stuff that doesn't happen. But I do want to talk about this idea of white strategic advantage. You like that? Because white privilege wasn't flying in Anoka County. I'm getting nowhere with white privilege because I've earned everything that I've gotten. Yes, ma'am. I'll take your hand. Yes.
I have a thought.
Yes.
Because white privilege, okay, we can understand white privilege things of us who are non-white. But with a white person growing up, it's not necessarily brought to their attention when they're very young, privilege. And so it can be confusing for that person as they get older to understand the concept.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on point. And so, I'll take your hand and then I'll make my point. Go ahead.
One thing also a topic is like hiring, being diverse, but also, because I've seen this at different agencies, and just like, we want to be diverse, but we want the best staff, and how do you make sure everybody's, you know?
No, I know exactly what you know. I was in HR. I was the affirmative action officer. So because
everybody wants to say how diverse their staff is, and it's really interesting how, at the same time, I see different parts.
Yeah. So one of the, I mean, so what I hear in the back part of your story is this idea that diversity means lower standards.
No.
No? Okay.
I guess it's not different. Just this. Do we? Maybe lower standards. I don't know if that's how I define it though.
Okay.
But different standards of, you know, that if you have two candidates looking to hire, they say, and one has more experience, but because they're a white person, are you cautious of hiring instead of somebody who's black?
Are you talking about reverse discrimination? Anyone ever heard of that? Reverse discrimination? Yeah. I think that is so interesting. Reverse discrimination.
Especially human services?
Yeah. Reverse discrimination. We'll talk about what discrimination is, but I'll give you a little teaser about that, right? Is discrimination a noun or a verb? It is in fact both. Can you have a reverse noun or a reverse verb? Chew on that. Right? So this idea of white privilege, it just sticks with me. So I believe that as practitioners, that's conversation that practitioners should have with other practitioners. We're looking at white privilege. We're going to look at how we dismantle that stuff, because that's the level that we need to talk with other practitioners. When we talk with our clients or when we talk with lay persons, it's inappropriate to introduce that conversation without having any other lead-in conversation, because it's confusing. My daughter is, she'll be 2 in June. She's smart, love her. She can count to 20 on her own, but does not know what they mean. She 1, 2, 3. Right? So she says her ABCs because it's in the song, and I did not know that ABC and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star are the same song. She was like, A, B, C, D, little star. She's like, oh, it's the same song. Now, as smart and as intelligent as my young 2-year-old daughter is, I am not prepared to teach her about calculus. I mean, she can handle it. But that would be inappropriate. And why would that be inappropriate to teach her calculus? Because she didn't take Algebra 2. Why else? Because she's 2. Her developmental level in terms of mathematics, we gotta get her to quit being tricked by her cousins who, they give her 4 pennies for a nickel. Because 4 is more than 1, right? We gotta get her past that stuff, right? And the same thing with our diversity conversations. So we can use that as we talk with other practitioners, but when we talk with lay persons, or we're trying to talk with clients, we gotta spoon feed them and kind of do a slip road. Anybody have that on your GPS, slip roads? No? Okay. Well, it's a British term, I guess. My GPS is set. British term. Okay. So we can certainly talk more about that, and how do we engage in conversation about white privilege. All right. So the other thing that I wanted to know. So I got people's expectations. Are there any other additional expectations? Okay. What things did you not want to talk about? Were there some things you were like, if we talk about this one more time? All right, then it's all on. It's game. So this idea of cultural humility. So in 1970s, in the late 70s, and actually early 80s, I think it was early 80s actually, there was a book that went, and I guess you couldn't go viral back then, but by today's standards, we would say it went viral, right? And the book was written by a guy by the name of Alex Haley. And Alex Haley wrote this book called Roots, or as my grandmother would say, Roots. Right? And so Alex Haley wrote this book, and they made a mini-series out of the book. Is anyone old enough to have remembered or seen that, or do they show it in your school? Okay, so lots of you know that mini-series, which I think is interesting that they would call it a mini-series, because it was on for 2 weeks, for 3 hours a night. I don't know what a maxi series would have been like, but this mini-series was quite epic in its proportion. And so that really got me to thinking, and it shaped a lot of stuff in my life as I was growing up, because there were scenes that my mother would say, cover your eyes. Did any of your parents ever do that? So they were watching something you shouldn't be watching or whatever, and they say, cover your eyes. And it was funny because we would cover our eyes, but we cover them like this. Right? So I'm sure she saw us do it, so it must have just been to make her feel better, right? So we would cover our eyes. And so when I come to this idea of the human soul, and I think about cultural humility, now again, remember, I taught high school and I taught middle schoolers. So I had to take really complex ideas and make them simple so that they can understand the principles. So if it seems like I'm oversimplifying things, I am. So recognize that, and hopefully you can see the nuances of the sophistication by which I present some of these ideas. And so what is the number one, not most valuable, non-renewable commodity on the planet? What is it? What's the most valuable, non-renewable resource on the planet? You. The human soul. The human soul. Religion's been after it since the beginning of man. Kingdoms have been built. Countries, universities, and logos want you to buy in with your soul. So what is the soul? And so when I started thinking about the human soul, I have to ask myself, what is that? And the best example I was able to come up with for the soul was watching the passing of my grandmother. I loved my grandmother. For the majority of her life and the majority of my life, I misunderstood my grandmother. I thought my grandmother was nasty. Nasty. She would do the weirdest things. Like, she would make us lunch, and she'd grab a block of cheese, and if there was mold on the cheese, she would cut it off and then serve the cheese. She would do other things like, if there was, we would have toast and jam. She loved toast and tea and that kind of stuff. So she would, if there was mold in the jam, she'd scoop out the mold and serve the jam. She was misunderstood, but I thought she was nasty. So my grandmother passes, and we have a tradition in our family that we have this thing called an open casket funeral. An open casket funeral. So we spend a lot of money on this fancy box. And the box has, it's got pearl inlay and that kind of stuff. So you look at it at different angles and it looks different colors. And it's got, gold eagle claws on each of the corners and that kind of stuff. And they squeeze my grandmother into this little box. And she doesn't wear the most flattering colors because she would never have worn that. And that is not her best wig. Right? And so my grandmother's laying there, and people are coming up, and they are paying their last respects to my grandmother. So some people say things to my grandmother. Other people pass notes to my grandmother. And still others want to touch the body. But how does my grandmother respond with all that attention? How does she respond? She doesn't. Why?
She's not there.
Because she's not there. The house is open, it's unlocked, but nobody's home. So then afterwards, we would go to her house and we have spaghetti dinner. And I want to tell you, you should not eat just anybody's spaghetti. All right. So we have spaghetti dinner, and people are laughing and joking and flipping through, the family photo albums and telling stories and lies about my grandmother. And you have that one cousin who's trying to steal the ashtrays, although nobody smokes, but the cousin, you have that. Okay, I got that cousin. So as all this stuff is happening, it feels as though my grandmother is there. But what? She's not. She can't animate anything. And so when the body becomes separate from the spirit, then we lose the soul. We lose the soul. I'll come back to another example of that in just a second. So, Roots, one of the opening scenes is with LeVar Burton. Does everybody remember, LeVar Burton, the Reading Rainbow guy? Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can do it. Right? You remember that? Right? So they kidnap a young African young man played by LeVar Burton, and the conditioner straps him in. And so the conditioner says to this young man, or he asks this young man a question, and he says, "What is your name?" And the young man, being played by LeVar Burton, in these straps, responds, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the conditioner says, "No, your name is Toby." And LeVar Burton responds, "Ah!" So the conditioner hits him again. And he says, "What is your name?" He says, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the conditioner says, "No, your name is Toby." And this continues on for some time. Until finally he's at the last leg. They both are at the end of their strength. And the young man is standing there limp. And mind you, this isn't a secret thing. This is out in front of everybody. The whole community of individuals is watching this. And so with his last bit of strength, the conditioner takes this medieval lashing device and slashes him in the back. And there is no whimper. And he says, "What is your name?" And the young man says, "My name is Toby." What happened? What happened? They broke his soul. They broke his soul. One of the ways that evil is able to work is that evil turns human beings into things. Domestic violence turns humans into things. Misogyny turns humans into things. And when we have this idea of when we break the soul, the human body becomes a thing and the spirit becomes powerless. It has less power than when it was connected with the body. And when we turn human beings into things, then we can victimize them. This is not a proud chapter in my own life. But I remember, and it was funny, my best friend, I just went to visit him in Seattle. And it's not something that we talk about because we're actually quite mortified by it. And but we talked about it, and he just shook his head, and I shook my head, and I was like, I don't know what we were thinking. He was like, we were kids. So we went to this, so as a male, there are certain rites of passage that you're supposed to do because you're male. You're supposed to do them because you're male. And one was to go to strip clubs. You know, strip clubs. Bow, chicka, bow, bow. Right? So yeah, so my friend was coming into town, and to keep up with our you know, our manly rituals, I take him out to a strip club. Now, at the time I lived in St. Louis, Missouri. And so there is St. Louis, Missouri, and then there is East St. Louis, which is in Illinois. And in East St. Louis, Illinois, whatever you can afford to do, you can. So they had special strip clubs over there that they called gentlemen's clubs, which I find ironic because no one was acting like a gentleman in the club. And so we're there, and I took him to this particular one because I heard they go naked. So we're young, and so we go into the club, and we're giddy because we're also nervous because we don't know what to expect, right? And so we go in, and we end up paying $17 for a 6-ounce Coke because that's what they do in those kinds of places because people like us are dumb, right? And so we end up paying for the thing. And so the young lady comes out and now featuring and so they start playing the music down. So she comes out and she's and now I'm poking him and he's poking me. We're like, oh, so she right. So this goes on, and so finally she starts taking off her clothes. So she turns around and she takes off her top, and so she's and we're like, oh, look at this the thing, oh, look at that, right? So we're doing all that stuff, and so finally she gets and she's on the pole and all this kind of stuff, and so then she turns around and she takes down her lowers, right? So she takes down the lowers, and so she's dancing, and then she turns around on the pole and stuff, and my friend and I, we go, oh my goodness. I look at him, he looks at me, we pack up our stuff, and we leave. We don't talk about it for a long time, but we knew exactly what happened. One of the things that we didn't take into account when we went into this place was that we might run into someone's mother. You see, she had an incision under her abdomen. And we sat there and we were mortified because that was someone's mother, which meant that someone else was someone's daughter, and that someone else's cousin, and someone else's sister, and someone else's, oh, what were we doing? We played into this whole thing of turning someone into, we were not there to uplift humanity. We were there so that we could feel better about making someone else feel small. So I have a problem with, those shows called Pimp My Ride. What is a pimp? Why do we want to be glorifying people who destroy human beings? Why do we want to do that? Make it rain. Do we really want? Have you guys heard those kinds of things? Yeah. Right. So the interesting thing is, once this human soul is divided, there comes a void. A void starts to form, and there is a monster that is waiting for that void, that is waiting for this divide to happen. And do you know what that monster's name is? Capitalism. Capitalism. What does capitalism suggest? Well, how many of you have seen a commercial that actually makes you feel better about being a human? What are most commercials telling you? You're not good enough. Buy this thing, except for the herpes commercials. Those people are living life, skydiving, skiing, all sorts. But most commercials are telling you how inadequate you are. So buy this product, do this thing. And a number of our clients are caught up into this, which is why we self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, or sex, or bad relationships. We self-medicate because we think that that's what will fill the void. But what do we know about those things? Do those things fill the void? How many cars can you have? How many homes? We've had avatars that have taught us that this doesn't work. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Michael Jackson. And the one that hurt me the most, Robin Williams. So we know that those things don't fill the void. But what does? A reunion between the body and the spirit. Recognizing that the shells that we live in, and I don't want to go into the whole idea of the depth of the spirit, but I just want to leave it at the animating force of your body. What happens to it afterwards? You talk to your people about what happens to it afterwards. But while it's in your body, it's extremely important to take care of it. And so the human soul. So let's go to your handout. Because one of the other things that also happened, particularly as I was coming up, is that we operated in a lot of these schools of thought, right? So there's white privilege and people of color internalized oppression. There's cultural competence and cultural destructiveness. There's intercultural mindsets of complexity and culturally relative ideas, and monocultural mindsets of simplicity and ethnocentric ideas. There's this idea of knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then there's sensitivity training, right? So there are all these models of diverse concepts. But I need to boil it down. I need to make it a bit more simple, and so we'll explore that right now. So in your, does everyone have a handout? Is anyone in need of a handout? Great. You're very welcome. So what I'd like you to do in your handout, if you open up the first flap, you will see that at number 3, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to write down one thing that is important to you or of value to you in each of those circles. One thing that is of importance to you or valuable to you in each one of those circles. It could be a person, like a significant other, a niece, a nephew. It could be a place like Belize or Bemidji. It could be a thing like a house or a motorcycle, or it could be a concept like freedom or love. So one thing that you value in each one of those circles, those gray circles. And if anyone's in need of a pen or anything, let me know, and I can make sure you get one. All right, it looks like most people have 4, if not all 5, so we'll go ahead with phase 2. And phase 2 is very simple. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to go around the room and find people who either agree with what you have on your paper, and in so much as saying, that's a good idea, or they have something that is similar to what you have, all right? So either they agree with it and say, oh, that is a good idea, or they say, I have something that is the same or similar to what you have. All right? Once you have found those individuals, what I'd like for you to do is have them put their initials next to the circle that they either agree with or they share with you. All right? I'd like for you to get a minimum of 2 people per circle, which means you'd have a minimum of how many people? 10, a minimum of 10. Any questions before we begin? You have 90 seconds starting now.
Do you have extra pens?
Can we do more than one on each?
60 seconds, 60 seconds. Thirty seconds. Five, four, three, two, one, and good job, good job. So, can you count up the number of people that you have that signed on your paper, and you can count duplicates. So you can count duplicates. So count the number of people that you have signed on your paper, and you can count duplicates. So does anyone have less than 10? Okay, so we have a few people who have less than 10. Any folks have 10? Okay, cool. Folks have 12? All right. 15? More than 15? All right, cool. Those who have more than 15, yell out your number. 18?
19,
23? 26? 20? Sounds like 26. Anybody got higher than 26? 26? All right, 26, can you raise your hand? All right, let's give her a hand. She is the winner. That's the question. So as you were going around the room, first of all, so with that, I'm making the assumption that everybody was at least able to find one person to sign on their paper. Is that it? That's true? Okay. So with that in mind, as you were going around the room, were there things you saw on other people's papers and you were like, man, why did I think of that? I should have wrote that down. What were some of those things? Yes.
I noticed some people did like concepts like peace, happiness, love, freedom. And I didn't go that route, and I thought, yeah, maybe I should.
So maybe you should have written down some concepts because you didn't go that route on when you did yours. Okay.
Exactly.
Other folks, what things did you see on someone else's? Yes. Sanity, right? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, actually, I don't think I don't know better, but I put actual people names
You put people's names.
in my circles, and other people had some kind of concept.
So what concept did you see that you were like, I should have wrote that concept? Faith. Okay.
Like, how do I have that?
Yeah. She's like, I have faith. Why did I put that down? Right. For other folks, what was something? Yes. Self. Right. You were like, oh, I'm so selfless. I'm in social work. Yes, you had your hand up. No. Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so there were things that we saw in other people's papers that we saw. Now, were there things that were either difficult or you actually did not get anyone to sign on? It was difficult to get someone to sign on those things, or you did? Yes.
One of mine is
Running!
running.
Yeah.
And context is important, right? Right. So, yes, that's what I was. Yeah. So if running or exercise is valuable or important to you, whether you do it or not, please raise your hand if exercise, running, getting outside is important to you. All right, great. What's another? Yes.
I wrote my abilities.
Your abilities. All right. So if having the ability to do something or the knowledge to do something is important or valuable to you, please raise your hand. All right, cool. I saw another hand over here. Yes. Free choice. If free choice is important or valuable to you, even if it wasn't written down on your paper, please raise your hand. Sweet. So what is the lesson or the moral of this particular activity? What point do you think I was trying to get across? Yes.
I think we want similar things. Is that, or we value similar things?
Okay. All right. Other folks, what do you think?
But I think framing and language deters us from those connections.
So framing and language deters us from those connections.
Assumptions that nobody else does.
Having assumptions that no one else does what?
Has those values.
Has those values, right? So those values are exclusive to me.
Yeah.
Or my kind, or yes.
Context.
That context about those values is important, right? So yes.
What's valuable to one person may not be valuable to someone else.
Very true, right? So what's valuable to one person may not be valuable to someone else. The converse is also true, right? And so, so growing up in this sphere of diversity training and all that kind of stuff, and I want to tell you, this was not something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be an executive leadership coach. After, I wanted to be Darren Stevens from Bewitched. After, I wanted to be Michael Jackson. Right? So this is not anything that I wanted to do. But in my learning and in my growing up, we spent a lot of time talking about the things that make us different. And I like to suggest that we needed a balance in the force. That we needed to also talk about those things that make us similar. And so my objective is to bring balance to that, to recognize those things that are different, but also to recognize those things that make us most similar. Because it is my belief that it is those things that actually can drive us to making some change. That what I want for my family is the same thing you want for your family. But we may have different methods of getting those things. And so we'll get to some other stuff in just a second. So this idea, and my daughter is that cute, but that is not her. But one of the things that struck me in dealing with my daughter was that I have iDevices all over the house. So I have 2 iPads, I have 2 Macs, we have Apple TV, we have all this stuff. And so, one day I was doing some spreadsheets and stuff on my tablet, and I set it down. Now, I have a master's in educational technology. I know technology. I have a master's. I'm a master of technology. Because St. Thomas said I'm a master. So I'm mastering my technology. I set it down. I'm doing something. I walk over. And my daughter, who's 18 months at the time, has my device. And she does not have a master's. And she opens that thing up, and she can't read. And she, Elmo. Now, wait a minute. As far as I'm concerned, if they laid out all the parts to the iPad and say put it back together, couldn't do it. It's magic. Even with my master's degree, it's basically magic. And so they took this high technology and they put it in this form and function that a master could use it, but who else can use it? A child who can't read. So what do we call that? And I started thinking about this concept that I've been to the ballet. Have you ever been to the ballet or at least seen it on television, right? So they have the people and they're doing this stuff, or even the opera singers, right? They get up there, I don't know if you've watched any of those exercise videos. Right? So, you watch the exercise video and you say to yourself, or at least I've said to myself, I can do that. Right? Has anyone been to a ballet practice before? Right? Hard. It's difficult to do those things. But those people make it seem easy. Right? So taking complex ideas and making them easily accessible, I would like to refer to that as diversity elegance. And so when we have cultural humility, we also have diversity elegance. So it doesn't necessarily matter the words that we use as long as we kind of get to the point. So if it's, if it's white privilege, if it's white systemic superiority techniques, whatever we call it, right? So at Anoka County, my office started out as the affirmative action coordinator, affirmative action officer, and then they switched it to the cultural competence coordinator. I don't even know what that means, but I had elegance, right? I had elegance. And we need to make these things palatable so that people can join us in the conversation. Because if we don't make this elegant, then we convolute what we're trying to do and we make it difficult for folks to interact with us. And so what I would suggest is that if we don't understand those circles, that we have those, that other people have those, then we get confused. And we fall into the trap that is set for us through obstacle illusions. Obstacle illusions. These are artificial barriers to human relations. They make us think that we're different when in fact we're more similar than we are different. And on that point, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back after the break, and then we'll get to our next piece. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, I'm trying to step.
So I don't know if I can help you.
Yeah.
It is bang in the middle. It's
Yeah.
just feedback.
Yep. Thank you.
Visual people looking up there, you see that.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe like walking up. Don't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because the room's a bit different.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
That's all. Yeah.
Hi.
So what was that? Obstacle illusion?
Yep. Obstacle illusions.
So funny.
Oh, good. What's that? People love you.
Are you going to return to the white privilege thing? It's kind of, yeah. Because what I was thinking, that, Ursula over there, who made that comment about, like, the white privilege is kind of confusing because they've not really heard of it. And sort of like, what? I think what part of it is linguistic, like with the word privilege, because I think it's working class. White guy thinks white privilege, but you're talking about my dad worked in the mine, blah, 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 and I'm, packing up my privilege. So I think that's like linguistically like a tricky entry point in. Maybe it's not culturally elegant. Is that what you're getting at? Because you think like, what is that a good way of introducing that conversation? Because there's a kind of block right away. In fact, listen, I work I'm a construction worker. Don't call me privileged. I work hard,
Right.
and they think, well, yeah, you do, but you're talking about class. And he's talking about race and other things, and you're not connecting.
But they're so.
But they do connect.
They do connect, but I also think that one is a distraction to talk about.
Sure, but what I'm getting at, and what I think you're getting at, is like, how do you even, like, because you want to engage the white construction worker, but if you hit him with terminology that he thinks, no, I'm not having that, then you've got an obstacle.
Yep.
And you've got to get rid of those obstacles to get everybody to hang on. You're a working man, you work hard. Why do you work hard? Well, because I have a family, and then you start coming together, and like everybody's work family down.
Yep.
Every single person.
Yep.
Is that what you're doing?
That's what I'm doing. And particularly after this video, we'll talk about that idea of even talk about institutional racism. What is that? How do I wrap my arms around it? So yeah, we'll
But I think, like the comment over there, and it might rather like, we're going, what do we call people? I do think language is very important because certain words are gonna like just sort of be like they're gonna be how to say it. They can block entryway into the conversation, and without the conversation, you're kind of screwed really. You're not communicating, and you can't even demonstrate your cultural eloquence because you're not in a conversation. People don't want. I'm not talking about privilege. So I think I like that you know like the skillful use of like linguistics and looking at words is really important. I think.
So one of the things we'll talk about is how you tether yourself. So
You just said, well, you don't even bring it up, you know, or you bring it up with words because you're talking. So that's why you know what I'm getting at with the words. So that's
So, and we'll also talk specifically about culture and what that is, and then how do you back into culture? Because people will say, I don't have culture. They do have culture, but it's not typically it's not in the forefront of their mind, right?
you're not from here originally, are you?
Not from the.
So have you noticed that people in Minnesota tend to think that they don't have culture?
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed that. I mean, I'm from Birmingham, Kentucky, and I know what a skip road is, by the way.
Oh, thank
and I was
you.
sitting there thinking, what do they call it here? What do they call it here? What do they? And I couldn't think of it. It's
it's on ramp or
no, it's something road.
Frontage road.
Frontage. It's a frontage. Exactly. So I was sitting there thinking, I know a skip road.
Okay, good. So I'm not crazy.
No, it's just
because they were like,
well, why is this TPS British?
I don't know.
That's bizarre, man. You're gonna get confused out there.
Yeah. No, I was like, for a long time, I was like, what is a slip road?
Yeah, it's just an on road.
Yeah.
It's just brings you onto the big road.
So now I love the fact that it says slip road because other people.
It like slips you in.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense.
I'll let you take your break.
So,
yeah. Do you need anything?
No, I'm good. It's good.
You know where the bathroom is?
I think so, yeah. All right. So, I hit you all with a number of enthusiastic and passionate concepts. Any questions or observations thus far? Any questions, comments, observations thus far? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we first started and before saying, like, how can I, managing interns, teach them, train them this? But I, as an intern, have a unique perspective in the sense that coming into it, I have some life experiences that some of my leadership, who's training me, doesn't have.
Yeah.
And so when they were asking those questions, I was also flipping it and saying, well, how can I, as an intern, educate the leaders that I'm working with so that they understand my unique and broad and diverse perspective too? Because sometimes I'm looked at as just an intern, and I'm like, well, no, I'm so much more than that. You just have to take the time to listen and be open to my perspective and experiences to understand that you can't just put all of us in the same box as well.
Yeah. So to that point, so what he's alluding to is something that I had to come to as a teacher, right? And I'll try to do my best not to stand directly in front of the thing. Anyway, so I'm trying to be conscious of that. Actually, I'll put a chair right here and stand next to the chair. Is a teaching and learning environment. So for a long time, I was just a teacher, but I wasn't learning from my students. When I started to learn from my students, then I became a different creature. I went from being a teacher to an educator. Because when I was a teacher at 3 o'clock, I want the kids out the building. Soon as staff meeting is over, I'm out. Poof, I'm rolling. What did we say in the Audi 5000 G back in the 80s?
Yeah,
You guys remember that?
yeah.
Audi 5000 G. So no, I was out. But when I became an educator, when I started learning from my students, when I had this environment that there was learning and teaching going on, I didn't mind them staying late because I knew why they were staying late. This was the safest place they could be. I was a trusted adult. And so one of the things that, oftentimes organizations get caught up in is titles and roles, but we don't necessarily take into account that people come as whole beings to us without having ever met us. Right? And so then the other question is, if you're an intern, what are we turning you into? Right? And so how we invite people into our organizations because we believe that they can make us better, not that we're just going to make them better. And if that is our ethos, that we are going to just make the world better but not be bettered by the world, then we need to check our rationale for existence. Because we know that human beings do not survive in isolation. My humanity is best demonstrated when I'm in relationships with other people and when I'm in the service of those other people. A great example of that is that Hanks movie, right? The one where he was stranded. What is it called? Castaway, right? He was in such a deep need of human relations that he called the ball Wilson. He made him an entity so that he could maintain his sanity. Right? So the need is that free. And did anybody else cry when Wilson started floating away? I was like, no, Wilson, come back, Wilson, please. So no. So for the need of the human soul to be in relationship and to be in the service of other humans is deeply driven. And our organizations won't do it naturally. We have to be the individuals who do that. People take care of people and organizations. Right? Any other thoughts? Any other comments?
One last thing.
Yes.
Because I'm learning when we're serving the clients, like I'm an intern at Tubman, I bring the transferable skills from when I was a peace officer and getting educated on the stoop by the people I was serving in the street who didn't have a master's, giving me a master's level education to the field where I'm serving now, where I realized that the clients I'm serving can bring me out of my ignorance and educate me. So that's why that piece to me is so critically important, because then I'm able to continue my childlike learning from the clients that I'm serving. Not that I'm going to change them, but if I'm open to the fact that they may change me by being open to their education and not stereotyping them or putting them in the boxes, you're just or you're this or that, then I feel like I'm having growth. Growth isn't necessarily coming from the institutional the agency I work is not coming from the rules and regulations. It's coming from the people that we're serving. But it's because I'm remaining open to that educational piece. Not that, well, I've got my master's, so I'm going to teach you something. No, they're educating me. But I feel like maintaining that childlike desire, that passion to learn from others is beneficial to me.
Hired.
Yes, add to this point, especially when you're talking about cultures, because cultures is an ever-changing aspect, especially with immigrant populations. We're always going to need immigrant populations, especially in cities, that you have to learn, you have to be able to ask those questions. Tell me about this. What do you like? How do you like this to be said to you? Because I think it's one thing if someone was raised in the United States. It's another thing if their parents were raised what they want. Raised out of country.
Yeah. Cultures are adapting to the context. Come back to that. Yes.
I have a comment and following what he said back there. I'm a person that works during the overnight, and it's a unique perspective working during the overnight. So one of the things that I have been telling the teachers, the staff is that we are there to not only help assist the people that we're working with teaching them this or that. But make no mistake about it, we're learning from them just as much as they're learning from us. So it's something that I just continue to remind the people that I work with.
Yeah.
So it's hugely important to have that awareness, that understanding, and I think it's
We call that humility.
yeah.
We call it humility, right? It is extremely important. So in social services, the thing that we have to keep in the forefront of our mind is that I have a job because somebody else is hurting. That's why I have a job. And sometimes we get confused because we think that the degree that we got is for us in this field. That's not why we got the degree. We got the degree, we got the license so that we know something that can help our clients, that we become a resource for them to say, client, I know this resource, that resource, or we can do it this way, or here's some methodologies that can help in that way, but it's not ever for us. And one of the things that it's a sideshow that sometimes, because of how money needs to operate in the Western world, we get confused about a lot of stuff. Like, for example, the DSM. We get confused about the DSM. What do people think the DSM is for? That's exactly what it's for. It's for insurance. It is a menu, a catalog on how you bill for insurance. And guess when it changes? Whenever they want to change it, right? But that doesn't necessarily so at any rate, so we get confused about this. And so what I'd like to suggest is that we need to keep that humility in recognizing that we have jobs because people are hurting, which raises our level of responsibility a lot higher than people who just make widgets. We make lives with what we're doing, and we break lives when we don't do it right. All right? Any other thoughts, comments, observations? I love you guys. You guys are wonderful. So I'm going to share a video with you, and I want you to pay particular attention to some of the themes that come out of this video. I think the presenter you will recognize. It's about 3 minutes, so we'll be able to watch this and just pick up on some of the themes. All right. So what reoccurring things do you hear? Oh, who's familiar with T-Pain? Anyone ever heard of T-Pain? All right. So T-Pain is a hip hop artist that does these, dramatizations of the urban experience with melodic melodies that transcend that urban experience. Yeah. Actually, he's just a dude who does auto-tunes on his. He uses a computer to change the voice on his things, so on his songs. So don't be distracted by that. You'll catch it, and there are also subtitles in this particular video. So we'll get started.
Tonight, with a greater readiness, let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days. These days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter what we know, because I've been to Mountain Top. I'll see the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not wrong about anything. I'm not doing anything. I succeed because we are. 1960 students all over the South started sitting in North Rockers. I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream. Taking the whole nation back to those great made by the founding fathers and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We got some difficulties in here, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to mountain top and I've looked over, I've seen the promised land. But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. We're not going about it, I'm not doing it. I've seen the glory of God. 1962, Nichols and Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up. And when the men and women straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere because of man. Head wild, too bad when you sit again. 1965, black people in Birmingham, Alabama, roused the conscience of this nation, brought into being the civil rights movement. Later that year, August, I'm trying to tell America about a dream that I had. We got some difficulties in here, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to mountain top, and I've looked over, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. We got some difficulties in here, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to mountain top, and I've looked over, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
So what themes stood out for folks? What themes stood out? Struggle. Hope.
Collective conscience.
Collective conscience. Civil rights movement. Perseverance.
Us versus them.
Us versus them. Police brutality. Bravery.
Standing up for your beliefs.
What's that?
Standing up for your beliefs.
Standing up for your beliefs. History. So I find it interesting. So the Mall of America, not last, 2 years ago, there was a protest there. And about 2,000 people showed up or so. The number, nobody had a ticker, so the numbers are varied. But it was a decent sized crowd that were there, and there were 11 people charged with the thousands of people being there as the organizers. Does anybody remember some little pieces of those stories? So I think it's interesting that I went to the city of Bloomington's meeting about the charging. So they're going to charge. They were trying to decide to prosecute folks or not to prosecute. And this was in January, and I can't remember if it was the 13th or the 16th. But both of those days are close to the King holiday, right? So or his birthday. And so so they were there, and they had a so they're deciding to charge these people for trespassing or illegal protest at the mall. And so but before this happens, they have a proclamation that they want to offer in honor of the King holiday. And so the Human Rights Commission receives this proclamation from the mayor saying, for all of the great things that Dr. King did and the way he struggled and helped push the agenda to make the world a better place, we want to offer today this proclamation for Dr. King's holiday. I thought that was interesting because they were going to prosecute people for doing what Dr. King did, play by play. So when I hear this, it just makes me smile to hear this. Does anyone know what speech this comes out of? This excerpt comes out of. All right, cool. So please raise your hand if you are an advocate for justice. If you believe that justice should be served. Okay. If you believe yourself to be an advocate for equality. So yourself an advocate for equality. So as a person who would consider themselves an advocate for those two things, I want you to ask yourself this next question, but don't breathe, don't respond. It's rhetorical. Just think about the answer. When you think about all the speeches that Dr. King gave, can you come up with more than one title? And if not, we have homework to do. So what speech do you think this came out of? It was, in fact, his last speech before he was killed. What's that? In New York. It was not in New York. It was, in fact, the mountaintop speech. Right? Now, the interesting thing about this particular speech is it is his last speech. And so I hear some things in the speech that send chills down my spine as he gives the speech. He gives a speech Sunday night. Monday morning, he receives an assassin's bullet in the neck and dies. He seems to know that he's not going to be around. He knew it. It's very interesting. He did some interesting things when he went down to Memphis because he wasn't supposed to go to Memphis. So it wasn't a part of their docket. It wasn't. And some people suggest that this was the reason that he was assassinated, because he went down to help the sanitation workers strike. And it wasn't just black sanitation workers. It was poor white sanitation workers that he went to help speak for. So he goes down there, and so he. I was reading an article that he had a tradition of sending his wife, Coretta Scott King, a belle, a jewel of the South. He would send her fresh flowers every time he was out protesting or at meetings away from home. And so this particular time, he sends her plastic flowers. Now, being a belle of the South, she's disturbed by this. How dare Martin send me plastic flowers? So she calls him up and she says, Martin, what's going on with these plastic flowers? And he says, Coretta, I don't feel good about this one. He said, there's something that this one is different than all the rest. And being a good wife, what does she do for her husband? What would you do? Reassure him. She reassured him. She said, Martin, it's okay. This is just like all the other ones. You're going to do it. You'll be back. I'll see you on Sunday. Blah, 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 blah. And he says, okay. And so she goes back to the flowers. She says, Martin, so tell me about these flowers. And he said, Coretta, I just wanted you to have something to remember me by. He says some profound things in this. He says, I might not make it, but we will make it. Now, what? We will make it? What we was he talking about? People of the United States, we will make it. We will make it. Now, the interesting thing about this is that he also says some other things that I think is interesting, because he talks about the mountaintop. He talks about having seen the promised land. And why would the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King use imagery like the mountaintop and the promised land? Yes.
Did not get to go to the promised land, but he saw the promised
So he is equating their the struggles in the civil rights movement with that Charlton Heston movie, The 10 Commandments. Let my people go out of my cold dead hands. No, that's Charlton Heston's NRA speech. I get those things. So he's mirroring this with an epic struggle, an epic concern. And so as I think about that movie that Charlton Heston started, and I think about the fact that, what if there was a part 2? What would the part 2 look like? So Moses doesn't make it into the promised land, but there's new leadership. Moses is off the scene. There's new leadership. They take the people into the promised land. They say, people, we need you to fight these giants. We need you to collect that milk and collect that honey and get those grapes and build this storehouse and do all this stuff. And the people are disgruntled. They say, wait a minute. When Moses was here, he did everything. And now you guys are making us work. And I can see them standing in my imagination on Pride Rock. They gather all the people together and say, don't go to that. No. They gather all the people together and they make this announcement in a drop the mic moment. So they make this announcement and then they walk off stage. So they gather the millions of people together and they stand in front of them and they say, Moses is dead. And then they walk off the stage. Why was it important for them to make that announcement? Everybody knew Moses was dead. The theory? So the action behind Moses? Why did they need to say that? To change their expectation? Why else? You have to do it yourself. If it's going to be done, it is going to be at your hands. Now, what I'm about to say, I mean with all sincerity and I mean with all seriousness. Dr. King is dead. Crazy Horse, dead. Mother Teresa, dead. Harriet Tubman, dead. Gandhi, dead. Nelson Mandela, dead. Will their work continue? Only if we continue it. Did you know that you are someone's Mother Teresa? Giving kindness, giving aid. You are someone's Nelson Mandela, someone who can bring calm to conflict. You are somebody's Dr. King. You can show them another way of being. But typically, it's hiding behind our embarrassment. How many of you have seen a situation where it's a either an kind of ethnic or even ethical conflict, or maybe it's a racial comment that somebody says or does, or you see something, or maybe it is something, a slight that someone makes towards the GLBTQ community, or they use a slang term that's not a cool slang term to use, that's not appropriate to use. And how many people have seen something like that? All right. Now, the next part of this question, don't answer. How many of us have been empowered to do or say something about what we've seen? You see, so one of the things that we have to recognize is that evil waits on silence. It thrives in silence. We are. Someone's liberator, but we're hiding or we're afraid. We're stuck behind our own embarrassment. And what are we embarrassed of? We're embarrassed of the fact that we don't know what to do. That's what's embarrassing. We're ashamed that we haven't had this conversation before now. We're mad because the people who brought us up never told us that we should be considering this from the beginning. How many of you have ever been set on fire? Set on fire. Okay.
Like whole body.
Whole body, hand, what you know, right? So the majority of us have never been set on fire. But I would imagine, go ahead.
Physically or?
Yeah, physically. No, like we're like, you know, flying. Right?
I wasn't sure, like, voice-wise.
No. I mean, flying, like, you know, Human Torch. Right? But I would imagine that most of us know what to do if we were on fire. What do you do if you're on fire? You stop. I've never been on fire, but I know what to do. Whether I do it or not is just a whole other thing, but I know what to do. And why do I know that? Because I was taught. It was drilled into me. We talked about it. We saw cartoons about it in school. We practiced it. We did all of these things. And so I know what to do. And so when these diversity obstacles come up, don't be, so part of the other thing that we're embarrassed about is our inadequacy. We feel inadequate for the situation. Let me tell you, as a parent, I'm inadequate for every situation. Stuff happens with this girl, I'm like, my master's degree didn't tell me that. They let me out the hospital without a certificate. Inadequate. Did you know that inadequacy is also AKA being human? And nobody wants to be human. We all want to be God. And if we can't be the God, we'll settle for being someone else's God. And if we can't be someone else's God, we'll be our own God. And so when we talk about this, we are liberators. You can be a liberator. I was at the dollar store, and I love the dollar store. And I love the dollar store because it makes me feel good about myself. I can afford everything in it. I go to Macy's, and then I need therapy. Right? So I'm at the dollar store, just doing my dollar store thing. And the trick about the dollar store is, those of you who have gone to the dollar store understand this trick, is that the trick is that everything is $1. So you get 50 of them, but it's only $1 a piece, right? So I'm in the dollar store, I have all these movies, and I'm sitting in line, and there's a couple with a small child in front of me, and they have one of those things called an umbrella stroller. Are you guys familiar with the umbrella strollers? I didn't know what they were called before, but now I know that they're umbrella strollers. And they're called umbrella strollers because you can fold them up like an umbrella, right? So they have this umbrella stroller, and the young lady is, she's wearing pajama pants, she has on house shoes, and a silk wrap on her head. The young man that she's with, his pants start here, but his underwear start here, right? And his hat is cocked to the side, and they're doing their transaction. So she pulls out of her basket an apple juice. And so she pulls out the apple juice and puts it on the counter. While she does that, the young man's eye is caught by something shiny. So he's looking at this thing on the side, and so they're in different positions in the same space, right? So she pulls out her EBT card. Are people familiar with an EBT card, right? Electronic benefits card, right? So she's in mid-swipe of her EBT card for the one apple juice, and the guy puts down his thing, and he sees her, and he says, "You stupid boop! How the boop are you going to use? I got money right here, you stupid boop!" Right? So he's going off on this woman, and the store is full of people, and we all do the same thing at the same time. We start checking the prices at the dollar store. How much is this? Because what are we saying? What is the choir? What's the concert saying as this thing is going on? What are we saying to ourselves? It's none of my business. Unfortunately, I have a voice that empowers me to do things that I'm not able or capable or prepared to do. And the voice says, say something. And I'm like, are you crazy? Voice says, say something. So I do what I sometimes do. Now I will tell you, I trust the voice. I know that voice, and it's never led me astray before. So the voice says, say something. So I go and make a deal with the voice. I make a deal, and I say, voice, if they're still out in the parking lot after I'm done doing my thing, then I will say something, right? Because my hope is what? They'll be gone, right? So I'm taking my time, and the cashier's like, "What's up, dude? Why are you taking so long?" And I'm like, so I do my thing, I get my stuff, and lo and behold, guess what? They're still outside. So they're walking down. So this is over in Coon Rapids, and there's a dollar store, and then there's a Rainbow grocery store not too far from the dollar store. And so they're walking towards the Rainbow store. So I follow behind them. And he's still cussing around, and he takes a call. And so I'm like, can't interrupt him on his call. So I said, voice, if they get off the phone before I get to my car, I'll say something. And lo and behold, what happens? He gets off the phone. So I have enough sense not to bother somebody that I don't know by walking up behind them, tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, I want to talk to you. Right? So I follow him into the store. I go around an aisle, and I meet this guy face to face. And so I will tell you that the voice was very encouraging in the beginning. But now I'm standing in front of this dude, and I got nothing. Now, one of the things that is in the back of my mind is I'm concerned about this interaction. And why might I be concerned about this interaction? No, I'm not concerned about my physical safety because I can fight. And if you fight like this, they won't punch you. They're laughing too hard, right? Come on. Right? No, I'm not concerned about me. I'm concerned about her. Because if I say the wrong thing, who's going to catch it? She is. So I'm asking. I trust the voice, but I'm asking the voice. You got me in this, so you got to come through for me, right? And so I'm stalling. So I say to the young man, I say, sir, can I talk to you for a second? About what? And I'm like, so I put my ears down. I tuck my tail between my legs. I want to show that I'm non-threatening. I'm like, no, it's all good, sir. Just want to talk to you for a second. Okay. And so now now we're doing our man thing. There's a man thing that we do sometimes. And it's just a split second. It's not a very long man thing, but you want to declare dominance with the other man that you're in, so you know what the pecking order is, right? And so he beefs up, and I know if I beef up, we're in this escalation, right? And then we're both on our tiptoes trying to, so I just back down. I acquiesce to him. You're the man. You be the man. Right? So we do this all in this split second, and all the while I'm stalling. And then the voice says, open your mouth. And now I'm excited. I'm like, oh yeah, he's going to get it. This is it. All right, let's do it. And so I open my mouth, and this is what comes out. Sir, can I share something that I've learned about women? If you want her to grow, you have to water her and give her sunshine. As this is coming out of my mouth, I'm like, what? So I repeat it, not for him, but for me. I said, sir, if you want her to grow, you have to water her and give her sunshine. Do you know what I mean? And he looks at me. He exhales. And as he's exhaling, the hypermasculinity and violence that was on him just kind of falls to the ground. And he looks at me and he says, yeah, I do. all right, sir, I'm out. What am I supposed to do? Peace, you know. And it took me a long time to figure out why the voice was compelling me to intervene in that particular situation. And maybe you saw it, maybe you can see it better than I did when I first was in that interaction. But why do you think the voice was compelling me to speak in that particular interaction?
You didn't make it about him.
Because I didn't make it about him.
Because your privileges allowed.
Because my privileges allowed me to.
Because you could.
Because I could.
The metaphor gave you a way to not make it personal, and so he could interpret it all kinds of ways.
Okay. So it didn't make it personal. So like you, I went down those paths. It was the same paths I went down, right? But when I got it, it changed how I interacted with people. I was encouraged to speak, not for the woman, not for the man, but for the baby. Sometimes as helpers, we think that we're helping the people that are in front of us. When in fact, when we help them break the chains for everyone that they're responsible for. Generational poverty, generational alcoholism, generational mental illness that's brought on by trauma. Once we help heal those individuals, we help break the chains for all those people who come after them. So it made me want to give smiles to people who aren't smiling. It empowered me to make eye contact with those people who hold the signs on the roads, whether I give them money or not. But I see them as human beings. Because when we don't do that, we don't become the liberators that we can be. Now, sometimes people ask me, well, Andre, you were able to intervene in that situation because you were black. I am not black. Could I intervene in that situation? What I would suggest is that you find that the situations that you can intervene in and intervene in those. Because you don't have to do what I do, and I don't have to do what you do. I'm not called to the circles of influence that you have, and you may not be called to the circles of influence that I have. But in the circle that you're interacting with, do you have the courage at Thanksgiving to talk about the white elephant? Do you have the courage in your spheres of influence with your friends, your families, to be able to question them in a way that I'm going to show you how to make them better people? In those circles of influence, it is a shame that people will fly over one mission field to go to another. Just stick with the field that you're in. Right? So there's that. Because what we want to talk about is this idea of we want to get to a place where we can talk about equity versus equality. And many people have seen a demonstration like this that's very similar, that equity is making sure that everyone has the same thing, where equality is that people have what they need to accomplish their goals. All right? So there's a difference between those things. We're going to talk a little bit about this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we do use those interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. All right? And that's important. And so what I would like to suggest is that diversity is about the law and who. Diversity is about the law and who. So let's go to your handout. Now let's go to number 2. The preamble to the Constitution reads as such: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, in securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. When I hear those words, my heart beats a nice thump. Love those words. Great words. Great words. As those words were being penned, what else was happening? Slavery. What else was happening? What was happening to the people that were immigrated on? Native Americans were catching it. Where are we? Right now, physically, where are we? West side. West side of what? The river of St. Paul. Why is it called St. Paul? Because what?
And there's a guy named Paul.
A guy named Paul. St. Paul. Why St. Paul? Religion? Christianity? Where are we? In America? Is that with a full or just America? We are on Indian land. It is called St. Paul because the Indians were removed from this land. We can never forget that. Now, people will say, well, let bygones be bygones. Let's move on. We can never move on because the hurt and the damage isn't just something that happened in the past. It continues today. Why did they change Lake Calhoun? Who was Calhoun? Who was Ramsey? J.J. Hill. Sibley. Hennepin. Father Hennepin. A lot of times, so one of the things that happens with systems of oppression is that they become normative to a point that we never question them. We never question them. And so when we start thinking about this preamble to the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, which that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Wonderful words, wonderful pieces. However, we fail to cash that check. Right? And as Dr. King would say, the check, when we went to cash the check, it came back as insufficient funds, right? But we tried to make amends to those things. So in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation is signed doing what for whom? Bring what? The slaves. What is a slave? It's a piece of property. It was a thing. Were these things that had hopes and dreams that were kidnapped from now, this is really interesting because you'll hear people make this argument that where's my phone? People will make this argument, and it is true that the United States, out of the millions of individuals that were being transported in the transatlantic slave trade, that the United States only imported 5% of all slaves that were traded. That's what the United States brought to this country. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is that about 48% went to the Caribbean, 41% went to Brazil as its only as its major import. The others were scattered throughout the Central America and out to Europe, right? So, but we only had 5% here. And why did they need so many in Brazil and in the Caribbean?
Indians could not tolerate that, the temperature, the working conditions.
So the Indians couldn't tolerate the working conditions. That may be the case.
Sugar plantation?
Sugar plantations. Where sugar was being produced, sugar has a very short lifespan once it's cut from the cane. So they were operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The average age of a person in the system of slavery on those sugar plantations was 23 years old. So the United States said, we have a new technology that we're going to use so we don't have to import so many. We'll treat them better and we'll grow our own.
The making of slaves.
So the 5% began to grow. Now, one thing I will say about the United States that is absolutely courageous of them is that they did all of their dirt at home. They brought everybody home. They did it right here. The Belgians didn't do that. Where'd they do their dirt? Over there. Where'd the English do their dirt? Over there. Where did the Spanish and the Portuguese do their dirt, so to speak? They did it offshore. But the United States, we brought it home. So when you wonder why we have the conflict, because we decided to be responsible and bring it home. So we have this idea of this 5%. So in 1863, I no longer want you to refer to those people as slaves, but I want you to refer to them as people in the economic system of slavery. Why did people go to West Africa and get folks? It wasn't because they were mean and evil folks. It was because of money, 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 money. Nobody can join me. OJ, nobody, OJ. Okay. So that's important. In 1920, August 18th, the 19th Amendment is signed. It did what for whom? It gave women the right to vote. It made them more than property and said that they have a voice in this great democracy. And then in 1924, the Indians, the Polk Act is signed, P-O-L-K Act is signed, which gives American Indians the right to be U.S. citizens. Pause for the irony. 1924. 1964, the Civil Rights Act is signed, and what does that do? What does that do? It does what? It gets rid of segregation, so it outlaws segregation, and it defines discrimination. It gives a handle for discrimination, which is absolutely profound. We'll get to that in just a second. And then lastly, 1978, Native American Freedom of Religion Act allows Native Americans to worship as they wish, when they wish, without any criminal retribution. So I was asking so my wife is Native, and on the res they do some interesting things. So they have there are lots of powwows around the 4th of July. There are lots of powwows around Christmas time, and there are powwows that are really close to a lot of other holidays. And so, I was asking, and I mentioned that in one of my sessions, and a young lady stood up and she said, "Do you know why that is?" And I was like, "No, I have always been puzzled as to why Native Americans have these events around these holidays, because I know they don't really celebrate them. So, what's the deal?" And so she said to me, "We have those celebrations around those times, so no one will bother us." I said, "Bother you?" She said, "Yes. People are doing their own things at that time that they don't give any consideration to what we're doing." I was like, ugh. So the Freedom of Religion, 1978. And then lastly, in 1990s, we had the Americans with Disabilities Act that did what for whom? It helped people who have disabilities. Please raise your hand if you plan on getting old. This act was for you. Right? Yeah, Christopher Reeve was Superman, and then he was not. Or he was a different kind of Superman. Right? And so, yeah, so the Americans with Disabilities Act says that we need to offer and give opportunities to people based on their abilities and not based on their disabilities. So making sure that ramps and doors and buildings and processes and procedures are accessible by all those who are capable of responding. So that sets this part of diversity. And so diversity is this idea of counting and cataloging differences. Diversity is about cataloging differences as it pertains to the law. And it's really focused on who is in my organization. When we talk about this idea of equity, what we're really talking about is what is the intention of the organization. And so how do what am I looking for as a supervisor in terms of equity? And so how do I do that? How do I actualize my intention? And then inclusion is the impact or the what we do around this idea of this triad. And so I'll give some examples of how that looks or how those play out in just a second. Full screen, please. So we'll come back to that in just a second. I want to talk a little bit about the four truths of human beings, and you'll find that on number 1 in your handout. And the first truth is that human beings can learn, change, and grow, even when we don't see evidence of it. There are tons of behaviors that I had as a child that my parents wished I would have changed, but I did not. Until I started buying my own clothes. It's funny how you buy your own clothes and because I used to drag my feet. I don't know how I did it, but I used to drag my feet and I wear out my shoes and my pants. But I don't do that anymore because it's expensive. It's expensive. So human beings can learn, change, and grow. People do what they think works, even when what? Even when it doesn't. They think that it works, so they do it. Even when it causes pain to others and themselves. But why do they do that? If it causes pain to them or to someone else, and they're not getting the results that they want, why do they keep doing it? Because that's what they know, it's familiar. So, Wells Fargo, I think it's interesting. They have this interesting racket going on, right? So my wife goes in to take care of some business, and my daughter throws a fit. And so my daughter's throwing a fit, and one of the bankers that's walking around. Have you guys ever been to Wells Fargo? So they have like bankers that walk around like hosts at a restaurant, right? Checking on your table. And so they walk around, and one of the hosts hands my daughter a sucker. Now, I think that's an interesting thing for a bank to do, to hand out things called suckers. I think that's interesting. What's more interesting is the brand name of the sucker. They're called Dum Dums. I think that's very interesting. So my daughter gets this thing, and she automatically calms down because she's on the sugar high, right? Right? So now, every time my daughter goes into the bank, guess what happens? She throws a fit because she thinks she's going to get a sucker. So my wife goes to the drive-thru. Why is my daughter doing that? Because what? The fit worked. But now she's doing the fit, but what's not happening? It's not working. because my wife got hip, right? So people do what they think works even when it doesn't, because what? It works in the past. Mr. Adrian Peterson got caught up in this. Mr. Adrian Peterson had to take a year off of his job. And why did Mr. Adrian Peterson have to take a year off of his job? Because he hit his kid with a switch. Now, Mr. Adrian Peterson is also very articulate. And when asked why he hit his child with the switch, he gave what most of us would recognize as not only a passionate appeal, but a very articulate one as well. And what was his rationalization for hitting his kid with a switch?
That's child raising, is that right?
Because that's how he was raised. That's how he was raised. What did Mr. Adrian Peterson fail to realize? Times have changed. Context has changed. So what we used to do, we don't do anymore. We give kids very stern timeouts. This is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. You sit there. Okay. Right? So humans can learn, change, and grow. People do what they think works even when it doesn't. All human behavior is goal-directed. I believe that we're always trying to get something through our behavior. I would like to believe in true altruism, but I haven't necessarily seen it. I think we're all, even if it's something touchy-feely, I think we're motivated to do things. And then lastly, attitude is a reaction to a goal. And what have you been taught about an attitude? What is an attitude? How many of you have attitudes right now? What's an attitude?
Things that need to be checked.
Things that need to be checked.
How you're thinking.
How you're thinking. It's a set of beliefs.
How you feel?
How you feel. Attitude. What did adults tell you about your attitude?
It better be good.
It better be a good attitude. What else?
I don't like your attitude.
I don't like your attitude. Fix your attitude, right? So the adults around me said the very similar things. We had very similar conversations. And I want to tell you, my dad was my pastor. So growing up, on Sunday, we would go to church from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. We stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. So Sunday, all day church. Friday night, I asked my dad for the car. My dad loves me. What does he say? No, he says, yes, he loves me. So I get the keys to the car. We're cruising for girls. I don't know what would have happened had we found girls. But we're cruising for girls. I fill the car up with gas. I come home before curfew. I toss my dad the keys, and he says I have what kind of an attitude? A good attitude, a positive attitude. Sunday, my best friend Dexter calls me at noon and says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sunday? Church. All day. But I'm 17. I'm invincible. And Jesus is my friend. So I go to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? Not only does he say no, but he gives me the hell sermon. And in our household, the worst consequence you could have was going to hell, and either you could go to hell on your own or my dad would show you the way. As a result of that interaction, I would say my dad had what kind of an attitude? A bad or negative attitude. Conversely, he would say the same about mine. So what is it that determines one's attitude? Your perception? The goals that each of us have. Let's bring it home. Anyone have a teenager in your life? Anyone ever been a teenager? All right, cool. So a teenager comes up to an adult and says, Mom, you look good in those jeans. Have you been working out? And Mom goes, what? Hey, wait a minute. You're trying to butter me up. And then, oh, you got me, Mom. You got me. But you still look good. Mom, I was just wondering if I could go over to Cindy Whitworth's party. It starts in 5 minutes. And the adult, after realizing they've been tricked, they come over and say, you know what? No, you can't go to Cindy's party. Your room is a mess. The people you've been interacting with are, I don't like your friends. Your homework hasn't been done, and you've been fighting with your brothers and sisters. No, you can't go. What happens to the kid's attitude? It flips, it changes, goes bad. So the kid gains 5,000 pounds, breathes heavy, and says, and they slam the door like they own it. So now the parents feeling bad. They realize, I just snapped off on this kid. Let cooler heads prevail. So they go over to the kid's door. They knock on the door. The beast monster behind it says, what do you want? And the parent says, you know what? I like Cindy's parents. I like Cindy. You can go to Cindy's party. Can't stay the whole time. I'll drop you off at this time. I'll pick you up at that time. And then we'll go run some errands. What happens to the kid's attitude? It changes. It at least gets better, right? So what is it that determines an attitude? When you get what you want, you have a good attitude. When you're denied what you want, you have a bad attitude. So what do I know about a client or a coworker who has a bad attitude? What do I know about them for sure? They're not getting what they want. And I have a responsibility that's twofold for them. What's the first thing I can do to help them have a better attitude? Give them what they want. Give them what they want. Give them what they want. But what if what they want isn't in the handbook? It's against the policies or procedure, or if I could give it to them, they couldn't handle it anyway. Then what becomes my responsibility? She said, give them their meds. Then what becomes my responsibility? Give them choices. Help them what?
Realign their goal.
Realign their goal. They need a new goal. When your parents told you to fix your attitude, what they were saying is you need to change your goal. Change your goal. So all human behavior is goal-directed, and attitudes are reactions to goals. So what are human behaviors directed towards? All human beings are looking for significance, belonging, and safety. Significance, belonging, and safety. Why do kids join gangs? Significance, belonging, and safety. Why do kids get A's on the honor roll? Significance, belonging, and safety. I was in a training once, and the woman said, Andre, I just want to know, why are all the colored people moving into my neighborhood? Guess what I told her? Significance, belonging, and safety. We talk about the other stuff later. Right? Significance, belonging, and safety. What are our clients looking for? Significance, belonging, and safety. What are immigrants looking for? They're looking for significance, belonging, and safety. And so when we understand that, when we look at those your 5 circles, I would imagine that those 5 circles relate directly to one of these 3 concepts, that it either provides you significance, a sense of belonging, or some sense of safety. So what is significance? Significance says that I am a person with purpose and power. I can do something. I was not an accident. I was on purpose. Now, the funny thing about purpose is that it can be something that is given to you by God, or you can choose it yourself. Significance. Belonging says that I am in relationships with people who understand my significance, who understand my contribution. I'm in relationships with them. And lastly, this idea of safety is that I'm safe to physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually safe to be in relationship with people who understand my significance. Safety, significance, and belonging. And so when we start looking at our clients, then this helps us to really understand what they are looking for, even if I don't understand their methods. Because we will call methods culture. And we'll come back to that in just a second. Any questions so far? I want to double check the time and make sure, because I do not want to stand between people and their food. All right, good. Got a half hour. Any questions, comments, observations? Cool. So when we start talking about this idea of cultural competence, we have to recognize this idea of context. And why are these guys not around any longer? They could not adapt. And I can adapt. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this, all right? So let's take a 5-minute break so that people can get their needs met. All right? I'll see you at 5. Thank you.
No, for your food. Yeah, 5 minutes. Do you want me to email you? No, I don't.
What's that?
I said I like your training. Yeah. I know that's what I told my staff. I'm like, if you do not write it down, I will not remember anything. You need to email me or text me or make I just don't function. Oh no. If you like understand that.
Yeah, I'll get you across.
If I go over there and get some shots, crossing over in the middle.
Yeah, or if you want to set up
Yeah, they don't. Well, my staff members do physical education.
What's your
A lot of them don't even know how to exactly. But I make my own like meals and things. It is delicious. It's actually not that bad. I have this one is 2 apples, kale, oranges, Greek honey yogurt, chia seeds, flax seeds, that, yep, and
want to try to like. So anyway, I had
Yeah, I like making them because when I go to work, especially the job that I have now, where like well, that too. Yeah, so I like drink my nutrition. I'll pack a lunch. I won't eat it. I'll carry the lunchbox after to eat stuff. So yeah. I can't. And like if I start working on something, I have to continue to do it, or like yeah, well, you're still getting paid.
All right. Ow! It's almost lunchtime. Yeah. All right. So, what I'm about to give you really was groundbreaking for me. Like when I discovered this, I was like, because I needed something to explain some things for me that that I couldn't find. Oh, let me get my clicker. That I couldn't find explanations for. So, so this idea of context. So the dinosaurs couldn't adapt to the environment changed. How that happened or why that happened is, up for scientists to determine. But these guys aren't walking around, chopping people's heads off. So there is that. Sweet. So context has a direct relationship or is a direct ratio to culture. And culture is supported by beliefs, by thoughts, by behaviors, and emotions. So where the failings of cultural competence have happened is that they have not taken into account the context. You have no culture if you have no context. But you always have context, which means you always have culture. And culture is the methods by which people adapt to their context. All right? So context. Culture is a group of methods of adapting to the context that people find themselves in. So this is my aha moment of my career. So how many people have used or heard of or studied the iceberg theory of culture? Has anyone done that in any social? Okay. So in that iceberg theory of culture, how is culture defined? So why an iceberg? What's the methodology, the metaphor behind the iceberg?
You only see it, a small part of it.
Yep, so you only see a small part of it, right? So the idea is that there's this big iceberg, and you see 10% of it, and 90% of it you don't see, right? That's the basic feeling, right? And so icebergs aren't organic in a way that I need them to explain what's going on in my own world, right? And so when I stumbled upon this, I was like, this is it. So in the iceberg theory of culture, there are the things that you can see and the things that you can't see. So I extrapolated that and came to this idea of the carrot of culture. And there are two parts to the carrot. There is the top part, and what do you call the top part of the carrot? What is that called? The what? Carrot top. That's original. Anybody have a scientific? Okay, so we'll just call it the carrot top, right? So we have so at the top of the carrot we have the carrot top, and at the bottom of the carrot we have the root. Root. Somebody said roots. That's how my grandma said. So we have the root. All right. Now these two parts have a symbiotic relationship. What's the symbiotic relationship between the carrot top and the root? What do they do for each other? So photosynthesis happens here, and what does that? Once photosynthesis happens, what does it do? So it gives all of those nutrients to the root. So what does the root do for the top? So it gives it stability, it gives it safety. So they have this symbiotic relationship. They're connected to one another. What happens if the carrot top is disconnected from the root? What is the destiny of the carrot? It is going to die, right? It is going to die, or at least wither away. So when we talk about this idea of culture, I want us to think of it in terms of this carrot. That the things that we can see about a culture, we will call artifacts. What are some artifacts of a culture? What are examples?
Holidays.
Holidays could be examples of a culture. What else? Buildings, wardrobe, diet, language, music. What's that? Clothing. Values, customs. All of those are things that you can see about a culture. So if these are the things that we can see, these are the things that we can't see, these are the roots or the values. So when I see an artifact, what is that a physical manifestation of? Value. So artifacts are physical manifestations of values. So when I see a woman wearing a hijab, outside of being a very great fashion statement, it is a statement of value. Right? A statement of values. Now, looking at your 5 things that you said that you value or that were important to you, what if I said to you, I am going to take one of those things away because it's dumb? How would you respond to me? Defiantly, with a bad attitude. Would I have a fight on my hands? Yes. Why?
They're appropriate. They're my values.
They're your values. They're your values. I used to be the pull up your pants police. You know, when you see people sagging, right? So I did it to my students. I did it to people on the street, strangers. I'd be like, and the weird thing is, they would actually pull up their pants. That was the weird thing, right? Until I understood something. That telling them to pull up their pants, I was attacking their values. Attacking their values. Now, so we'll come back to, no, we'll do it now. So I was attacking the values. Yeah.
I don't see the connection.
Okay. Help me help you.
I don't understand how somebody wearing their pants halfway down their legs is part of a value. So I can reach to hear your
Yeah, so if it is not a value, if it's not one of these, so this is a segue to something else too. So I'm going to ride this one. So if it's not a value, if it's not giving them significance, belonging, and safety, why are they doing it? Because that's what values do, right? So values manifest safety, significance, and belonging, right? So if they're not doing it for that, why are they doing it? So, go ahead.
Quote you, people do what they think works.
So they think that it works because it's helping them to get safety, significance, and belonging. Now, this is where, as practitioners, we become judgmental and we disconnect ourselves from the human existence. If they don't do it to get safety, significance, and belonging because those are their values, then there's something wrong with them. They are broken. What do we do with broken people? We try and fix them. How well does that work for a spouse? She said, divorce. No, we can't fix people, right? So, whether I agree with your values or not doesn't negate the fact that you have them. Whether I like them or not does not negate your ability or your right to have them, right? When we talk about the preamble to the Constitution or even the Declaration of Independence, it didn't say that I had to like them or that they had to be normative to my existence. I don't even have to understand them. So, hanging pants is a value to somebody. Now, when I said I was the pull up your pants police, I was acting in a certain kind of perspective that I thought that hanging your pants down had no value. That should not be a value. I thought it was dumb. And what would happen when after a while, I asked kids to pull up their pants? Guess what they started doing? Pulling down their shirt. They wouldn't pull up their pants, they'd pull down their shirt. I'm like, that's not true. They were like, you don't want to see me, right? So what I started teaching my students, no, I'll tell you the story. So Lou Diamond Phillips, Stand and Deliver. Anybody ever seen that movie? Lou Diamond Phillips, James Olmos, right? So love it. It's a good movie, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. One of my favorites.
Right? Love it. Love the movie. So there's a scene in the movie where Lou Diamond Phillips is talking to James Olmos, who's his teacher. And it is a bad impression, just bad. I'm just telling you right now. Yo, teach, I need a new set of books. And the teacher's like, what do you need a new set of books for? What do you need another set of books for? And he says, I need some school books. The teacher's like, what do you mean school books? He was like, I got a set of books for home, and I need a set of books for school. Because I can't be caught in my neighborhood with no books in my hand. And the teacher said, oh, Yeah, I'll get you some school books. Equality versus equity, right? So when I was the pull up your pants police, I was telling kids that you need to pull up your pants because dot, 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 dot. But when I became an educator, I shifted and I said, you know what? In your neighborhood, you might need to keep your pants down. But when you go to work, pull them up. If you want to be successful in these types of ways, pull them up. One of the things that, I'm teaching this, I'm talking with my class at Bethel about this, because there's this educational gap or access gap. It's not really a gap, it's a rouge, it's a Trojan horse, right? The Trojan horse is, we're in middle income or lower income schools expecting kids to know middle class values without ever telling them what the middle class values are. That's the gap, right? So we're playing this game, but we're never telling the kids what the rules are. And so how do kids respond to that, particularly young people or disaffected people? I see the game. So we just did, and many of you have done this exercise, probably in another training or so, but I just did this in class. So we, I'll make sure I don't go over lunch. We did this in class where you get everybody in the same line and people take a step forward or take a step back based on privileges that their family members have given them, right? And so they do all of this stuff. And so so we're doing that game, and the person at the front obviously wins and all that kind of stuff. And it has nothing to do with their personal stuff, but it's where they find themselves in the because of previous things. And so what we're expecting of kids to know, and so as we're doing this activity, I find it interesting that the people towards the front move. They try to get the prize. But the people in the middle and the people in the back don't move at all. And why do you think that is? Why do the people in the front at least move, but the people in the middle and the people back don't move at all? They can see it.
They want the attention.
They want the attention.
People in the back don't think they have a chance.
The people in the back know they don't have a chance. They're not dumb. They're not idiots. They're not people who can't reason. They see how the game is played and they say, I can't play the game anyway. This is the interesting thing, because young people in particular will say, if I pull up my pants, I'm still going to be harassed. If I keep my pants down, I'm going to be harassed. If I wear my pants backwards, I'm going to be harassed. So it doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to be harassed. So I'll do whatever I want to do, whether you like it or not. And I will tell you that the more we dislike something, the more kids who are already disaffected like it. Say to a young lady, you don't like that boyfriend. Guess what? That's the one. That's the one. So what do we say to young people? We say, yes, and. Say yes, and. I had so a number of my high school students or my middle school students weren't as articulate as I am or as we are. And so everything for them was racism. Didn't matter what it was. It was racism, racism, racism. So I could peel apart the thing and say, no, it wasn't racism. It was because you got a bad attitude. It wasn't racism. You just didn't have enough money to get the thing. So it wasn't racism. I could spend all my time doing that, but that took a lot of time. What I said to them was, yes, and could it be? So I'm validating your experience. What you experienced is real for you. And could it be something else? And so most of our clients, they're looking for first validation. That what I'm experiencing is real for me. It may not be real for you, and you may not necessarily understand it, but I need to validate it for them. The last two pieces, and then we'll have time for it'll be in time for lunch. How much time do I have before lunch? It's what time is it now? It's 11:45. Okay, good. 15 minutes, and I'll knock this out, and we're going. So this idea. So that's what I mean by that, right? So it doesn't have to be something that I understand, value, or appreciate myself, but I have to recognize that the client, that the person that I'm working with values that. And if I try to take away that value or I diminish that value, then I have an adversarial relationship with them, right? And that's not what I want. I want to have a collegial relationship because we need to build this thing together. So what happens when the artifacts are disconnected from the culture? The artifacts become stereotyped and we lose the culture. So I was born October 30th. And as a kid, I loved my birthday. Loved it. Because I had the 3 C's. Costumes, candy, and cake. Right? Loved it. It was great growing up. And people, trick or treat, and all this stuff. Loved it, right? Loved it. As an adult, I hate Halloween. Because it's the one time of the year where racist people get to exacerbate, demonstrate the fullness of their racism and homophobia and misogyny, right? It is so funny when dudes try to dress up as women for comedy. They never dress up like real women. They dress up like these caricatures of women, right? With exaggerated body parts and all sorts of different kinds of places. And so this idea of stereotypes. So I'm at the bank, and at Wells Fargo. I don't know. They're not paying me, so I don't know. So I'm at the bank, and I'm standing in line, and this guy comes in with this purple outfit on, and his shirt is, the first button is right here. He's got these gold medallions on. He's got on these high heel shoes and this big purple leopard lined hat, right? So he's standing there and he's trying to get my attention, right? So you know when people are trying to get your attention, right? So he's behind me, he's trying to get my attention, and he's like, and so I finally give him what he wants, right? So he wants some attention, so I give him some attention, and I said, "How are you?" He was like, "I'm good." And I said, "Halloween costume?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you?" And he looks amazed, like disappointed and amazed. He's like, "I'm a pimp." I think to myself, you have never met a pimp. Because they don't dress like that. Right? Pimps, even in the movie, Superfly. Anybody ever watch Superfly? Superfly and all the blaxploitation films. Right? Them cats were smooth and cool, like, while they're oppressing people. Anyway, so what was he operating out of? A stereotype. So what is a stereotype? A stereotype is an artifact that's been disconnected from its value. So have you ever wondered, isn't that stereotype true? I mean, even just a little bit? Yeah, it is, because it's been disconnected from the thing that gives it meaning and value. Now, what happens when we lose our artifacts? We have a lost culture. I'm in my garden and I accidentally rip off the top of the carrot. It is going to be difficult for me to find my carrot if I haven't mapped it out. If I haven't mapped out my garden, it's going to be difficult for me to find it because I don't have the artifacts. So the artifacts are the physical manifestations of value. So when I see artifacts, I know something about people's values. Crisscross will make you jump. Nobody. You gotta get with me here. Come on, right? So what was Crisscross's signature thing? Backwards clothing. Did that last very long? Why? Because nobody valued it but them. Right? Yeah. So when we have a loss of artifacts, we have a lost culture. And you know what I call this X? I call that X Ellis Island. Ellis Island. What happened as people were coming into the country legally and illegally from Europe? Yeah, names were changed. Could they bring everything on the boat? No. Could they bring everything to the island? No. So artifacts were left. And so when that started to happen, people started losing their culture. And it's so funny because I'll ask my Hmong students, tell me about your culture. They have something to say. I ask my African American students, tell me about your culture. I ask my Latino, Hispanic students, tell me about your culture. They have something to say. My Native students, they have something to say. My West Africans have something to say. My East Africans have something to say. I ask white Americans and they say American. Like we're all American, right? They don't have anything to say because they don't believe that they have culture. But if you have a context, you always have culture. And what do we know about context? Does it stay the same? No, it changes. And we have to change with that context. So culture is in direct ratio to culture. Culture and context are inextricably tied. That artifacts and values are inextricably tied to one another. And that they represent these symbolic relationships. And so if I want to understand what's going on with a client, I look at their artifacts and say, okay, here are a certain set of values. So let's back into your culture. Because the way we talk in the U.S. isn't how other folks talk or even think in the rest of the world. There's high context cultures and low context cultures. We happen to be in a low context culture where the words mean a lot, but the thought behind the words isn't as important. Where in other cultures, like Native American cultures or Asian cultures that are high context cultures, the words mean less, but the thought and the meaning behind the words means more. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about high and low context right after lunch. So we have this kind of stuff going on. So Ellis Island is where people lost their artifact. And so when folks have lost their culture, what typically happens is a couple of things. One is that we do something called cultural appropriation. Has anyone ever heard that concept? Yeah. Right? So there's a couple of spins off of that I'd like to kind of offer you. One is cultural misappropriation, and the other one is cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is where you see things that you think might be helpful for your culture, and you stick it on. You just say, I think that's going to be helpful, so you stick it on. Cultural misappropriation, and the distinction being, is that I see something from another culture that I want, that I like, because I think that it's cool, regardless of what the other culture says and what it does to my own culture. So, for example, Dwayne Johnson. You know Dwayne Johnson? Everyone knows Dwayne Johnson? Yeah, also known as The Rock, right? Sometimes people get us confused, but that's okay. Right? So Dwayne Johnson has this beautiful tattoo on his, is this your pec? What is it? Right? On his pec and on his arm. It goes down. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And it's all intricate and all sorts of stuff. And I saw a guy on Facebook who got one just like Dwayne Johnson. Just like him. Who is Dwayne Johnson? Who is he as a person? Where does he come from? What's his background? Who is Dwayne Johnson? He's Polynesian, right? So guess what about his tattoo? It's a Polynesian tattoo that was offered to him as a sign of leadership or reverence in his community. But guess what about the guy that was wearing the tattoo? He wasn't Polynesian. He got the tattoo because he liked it. That would be misappropriation, right? And so this idea that once we have lost culture, sometimes we try to put things on. And so when we don't know where we come from, we start making up stuff about who we are. And then we can fall into traps that are set for us. And then we'll start calling ourselves colors because our humanity has been cracked. So I am white. Where is white on the planet? Where's white? Where is black? And you cannot say Nigeria. You cannot say it. Right? Where do people come from? You don't get to details.
I was just going to say it's interesting in today's time period that when you're asking people your ethnicity versus your race, that people are still, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that the federal government does not necessarily make those kinds of distinctions when they allocate people's races and so forth and so on. And we'll talk about that after lunch. People come from other people, and other people come from places. And so there is no place called white. There isn't. There's no place called black. There's no place called red man. Right? There's no place called, yellow. There's no place called Asian. There's not. And so when we don't remember, when this isn't intact, when people can feed us all sorts of stuff. Did you know that particularly during the 1800s, it was better to be a person in the system of slavery than to be an Irishman? Right? And why was that? Because slaves could be sold, but there was nothing you could do with an Irishman. It's also interesting that, we're talking about mascots and all that kind of stuff, and we talk about the Red Man or Chief Wahoo or Black Hawk. Did you know that Black Hawk was a person, not a tribe? Right? So I saw a lady at Cub, and she was wearing her Black. I said, "Do you know who Black Hawk is?" And she was like, "A hockey team." I said, "All right, peace." Right? Yeah. Anyone ever thought about the Fighting Irish? Right? Notre Dame, Fighting Irish, right? Anybody ever thought about why they were fighting? Who they were fighting? Why do the Irish drink so much? No one ever asked those questions. Guess what? The Irish were the Native Americans of Europe. They were nomadic people who, by the kingdom, wanted to, put them in squatted settlements and box them in, and that's not the Irish way. And it's so funny if you look at the patterns of oral history, the patterns of drums and music in natural spirituality. Native Americans and Irish are right alongside of each other. Very much the same. But I find it interesting that what do people who don't get mental health services, how do they deal with those mental health services? Drugs and alcohol, right? Why the Irish drink? They're trying to escape persecution. And now we've glamorized their pain through drinking green beverages in their honor. But we condemn Native Americans for dealing with the same kind of stuff differently. The growing use of drugs and alcohol in our immigrant communities, in the Hmong community, in the Liberian community and the Somali community, as those things grow, we're not asking why are they using those particular tools. And I think once we get to that point, we can actually get to a place where we start to hero culture. And so when we see these artifacts and we see these values, we need to know that they are connected and cannot be disconnected from one another. One more slide and then we're done. Any questions, comments, observations? I hope I wasn't too dogmatic in my response to your question. No? Okay, good. Thank you. Because context is everything. Context is everything. How many of you have, well, I'll just put it out here. Context is everything. How many people have family members that refer to Brazil nuts by another name? Do you know what a Brazil nut is? Right? Yeah. So anybody want to say what that other name is? Nigger toes. Nigger toes. So Brazil nuts are these. They're like a wooden nut that's kind of like an orange wedge, and mahogany, really hard and crinkly. And older generations, go ahead.
The nut's longer, white.
Yep, and the nut is long and white. And so the older generation would refer to those as nigger toes. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the people that you know that may use it, and it's interesting that my family never called them, they always called them Brazil nuts. That's interesting. But the people who called them those toes, did they make that up themselves? No, they didn't make that up themselves. Why did they call them that? Because of their context. So context is everything. And context constantly changes. I want you to think about this, and then we'll be done. There will come a time in the future where men and women will use the same bathroom at the same time. Now, when I first thought about that, I was like, ugh! Anyone been over to, what's that restaurant in Uptown, Chino Latino?
Yeah.
Right? Their bathroom thing. Have you been to the bathrooms over there? It freaked me out the first time I was there because the lavatory where you wash your hands is open and both genders kind of use that. But then the toilet facilities are kind of blocked off. But it freaked me out the first time. I was like, oh! Right? So however people think they feel about that, whether positively or negatively, that's the same way that people felt about black people and white people sitting in the same room, eating in the same restaurant. Context is constantly changing. And either we adapt or we become a Jurassic Park. Let's go have lunch. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I didn't think so.